Good morning. This is a production. Good morning. This is going to be a talk about the sensory learning program. It's a natural solution to behavior problems, and it's about making sense of the behavior in your child. Brought to you by Arizona Vision Therapy Center. All right, who am I? I am a developmental / neurocognitive optometrist at the Arizona Vision Therapy Center. We've been practicing vision therapy for the past 10 years, and we've been having a lot of fun with it and having a lot of successes. But every once in a while, we would have patients that they had something that we could not get to, we could not fix. And we found out that the best way to do it was to take all of the senses at once and integrate them as a team, instead of just doing everything in little bits, like vision and auditory, or vision and vestibular, which means balance. We found out that if you put everything together at the same time, then you end up with a much better result, and it's much more stable foundation. So people who want to be listening to this talk are people who are feeling very tired, very frustrated, worried about the future of their children. Because the children, they're not eating the right foods. The textures and the smells of the healthy foods are just too much for them. So they tend to go for the chicken nuggets and the French fries. We got the kids who don't like change. Anytime there's a transition, especially if it's unexpected, you're going to see them on the floor throwing a tantrum. They're the kids that you can't leave alone for more than 30 seconds or they redecorate your bathroom. And the kids that just cannot sleep through the night. They tend to have something that causes problems, like night terrors. Some common thoughts of patients that have gone through here, or parents of them. He's so overwhelmed in noisy environments like the school cafeteria. She's so distractible. We just need to find a way to increase her attention span. We need to figure out how to decrease his anxiety level. And there's just something is just not connecting for him. This is almost every single patient that's come through here. A lot of the times they've already come in with labels. For example, we got ABI, which is acquired brain injury. We got developmental delays, central auditory processing disorder, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, PDD, NOS, which means they have no idea what it is, but something's just not right. ASD for the autistic spectrum disorder, high functioning autism or Asperger's. You got ADD, ADHD. Oppositional defiant disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder. The funny thing about all this is every single one of these, at the root core of everything, it's a sensory processing issue. It's their senses aren't making sense and they aren't matching well, so they end up having problems. So what is sensory integration? Now, there are a lot of senses that you learn in elementary school and everything. I'm going to go through 3 big ones that affect us on a daily basis. The big ones. We got the visual, we've got the auditory, and then the one that you haven't quite studied yet was vestibular. Vestibular is balance, knowing where you are in space, knowing where up is. Some possible reasons for sensory integration problems. This can go all the way back to when you were in your mom's belly. If your mom was on bed rest, then you weren't getting that swaying motion that would show you where your center was, and get that nice rhythm and timing that you would need later in life. If there's lots of stress, so if the mom's stressed out, her body's going to be shooting adrenaline and cortisol into the baby's system so that the baby will prepare for a dangerous environment when he or she's born. And that's going to cause a lot of problems with the milestones. Because if you don't go through the milestones, you don't learn how to use your eyes to read well, to use your hands for handwriting well, that type of thing. So you need to be at least semi-relaxed when you're born to be able to go through the process of learning what you need to do. You also have the illnesses, the medications, premature birth. That was me. That's the reason I went through my milestones pretty quick, and I became the most anxious person you'll ever meet. You also have problems with oxygen. If there's any deprivation in there, you're going to have problems with getting the nerves to fire in the brain in a nice regular way. Other possible reasons for sensory integration problems. We got developmental delays. And yes, it could be genetic findings. Yes, you could be tagged with Down syndrome. You could have cerebral palsy. You could have all kinds of problems. But the thing is, the problem is not in the structure. The problem is in how the person is using that structure. So most of the time, if there is a sensory integration problem, there's a way to teach the person how to integrate those senses and how to make them all match. Other reasons, we've got environmental influences. This is for a lot of the populations that have problems detoxing. And just a side note, if you're in fight or flight, you're not going to be thinking about detoxing because you're going to be in survival mode. You don't need a detox when you're in survival mode. This can be anything from pesticides and herbicides. You got food dyes, preservatives, medications, and anesthesia. People don't think about this. Anesthesia is a neurotoxin. It's a well-regulated neurotoxin, but if you have the inability to detox from it, then you're going to have lasting effects from each surgery that you do. Other reasons, okay, we have trauma. It could be physical trauma, okay? I've had a lot of kids come through here, they fell out the shopping cart, landed on their head. Mental, it's funny, it can be really small stuff. Say if the family suddenly packed up and had to move to a different state when they were 6 months old, that can have a lasting effect on how they develop. Emotional, especially say in the moving type thing, if they felt that something wasn't right, they didn't feel like they fit in, they felt abandoned, anything like that can actually trigger chemical cascades in the brain that'll make it harder for the baby to learn the lessons it needs to learn. Some behaviors you're going to find with sensory integration. Attention problems. And I've seen them all. You've got kids that come in here and they just sit on the chair and you can't get them to talk to you. You can't get them to listen to you. They just sit there. And then you got the hyperactive, the ones that touch everything and they break it. They try to put it back together. They break it again. All of those are definite behaviors of sensory problems. Ones that avoid sensory information. So these are the ones that like to go in a little corner and they like to wear headphones. They like to avoid loud noises. And then you got the sensory seeking. Those are the ones that want really loud music. They want to be dancing. They want to be jumping. They want to be getting into things. Then you also have the hyper-focused versus easily distracted. That's the ADHD symptoms. So hyper-focused, what they do is they actually try to ignore some of their senses so that the one they trust at that moment is the only information that they're bringing in. And then the easily distracted, that's just every sense is something they can't regulate, they can't ignore. Other behaviors, unreasonable anxiety, which after you hear this talk, you're going to find out it's not that unreasonable. Problems with social interactions. So these are the people who they can't get sight and sound to match well. So when they're sitting there trying to watch your lips move while you talk, your words and your lips are not matching. Just like, have you ever tried to watch a movie where the voice and the lips were just off? You notice that you couldn't stay with that movie for very long. Same thing happens with these guys. They tend to feel like a failure because they're not hearing the instructions correctly. They're not doing things in order. They just don't get the big picture, so they don't understand what is needed from them. So they do things wrong, and they're going to do things wrong. And they're not going to learn from past mistakes because they have a problem connecting those. They have problems handling transitions. That's the ones that have the tantrums. They appear disorganized and clumsy. So there's many, many more. If you have any questions, go ahead and email me at visiontherapy@live.com. I would love to talk about those. Right now I'm going to transition into current methods for handling these. First one here, we hear a lot about discipline. If they're misbehaving, then they should be disciplined, right? Well, a lot of the times when their senses aren't matching, everything is traumatic. Everything is something that's going to hurt their survival. So a lot of their behaviors are just to get them out of that situation that they feel is just way too intense. So here they are, they're trying to just get out of this situation, and then they get punished for it. They don't understand the connection. So a lot of times discipline does not work in this situation, these situations. Tutoring and one-on-one support. This I love, but the thing is, when they have problems with these senses, what they learn tends not to stick. So if they have a tutor and a one-on-one for the rest of their lives, great, I would love that. But the thing is once they get out of school, they tend not to have as much one-on-one support. So they're going to have to learn to be more independent, right? And then we also have medication. Now, here's the funny part about the medications. Like, for instance, ADHD medication. The main mechanism of the ADHD medication is to stimulate the brain so much that it can handle all of the extra stimuli that's coming in at it. Well, the problem with that is here you're already having a lot of stimulation from the senses coming in, and then you get internal stimulation. What ends up happening at the end of the day is you tend to get a crash, and it tends to be something that they can't keep up forever. All right. So we're finding new methods to help this. Sensory integration, which I'm going to be spending the next little bit talking about. And then I wanted to definitely mention nutrition. You need the right chemicals, you need the right supplements to be able to make it to your brain, for your brain to build the connections that it needs. If you do not have proper nutrition, then the sensory integration does not work as well. So during our sensory learning programs that we've run so far, I would say we're going right around the 90-95% success rate. That last little bit tends to be ones that have problems with digestion. And once we get the digestion figured out, they tend to do a lot better. So sensory integration itself, it's a multimodal is what it's called. So it's working on the visual, auditory, and vestibular all at exactly the same time to make sure they all click and make sure they all connect simultaneously. So things that can be helped with the sensory learning program, you've got the auditory vestibular problems, so hearing and balance. This, you'd be surprised what this affects. Articulating and sequencing sounds. So speech, being able to understand that when you read something and say something, that it's the same thing. Locating the direction of sounds, moving with a sense of rhythm and timing, and being able to tell what comes first, what comes second, so sequencing. So it also helps with visual vestibular problems, and here it is, like catching a ball. You need to know where your hand needs to be, what time, what place, and you got to be able to catch everything that's happening. You need to know where you are to be able to make it happen. Riding a bike, so keeping your balance even if you have to turn. Artwork and handwriting. Balance and center of gravity. Math concepts. Okay, there's a whole bunch that goes into math. Okay, you need to be able to memorize the facts, yes, but you also have to understand space. So each unit needs to be a consistent unit of space. So 4 plus 3 is always 7. It's not 5 this time. It's not 8 next time. It's always 7. So you go through there and you need to make it consistent. And a lot of times when these senses aren't matching, just them looking at space is not consistent. So they go through the program and we make things a lot more consistent for them. Movement in space. I've had so many patients just in this last month that the main thing their parents noticed is every time they were running and they tried to get around a corner, they'd bump into the corner and just sprawl on the floor. These are people who don't understand space. All right, visual auditory problems. So this goes into them a little bit more abstract type thing. Thinking in words and pictures, grasping abstract concepts, cause and effect, being able to connect something from the past to make it make sense with something you're now learning, relating letters to sounds. So these are a lot of problems with phonetics, a lot of problems with reading, reading comprehension, and the ability to see what you're reading and thinking. So the sensory learning program itself is very exciting. It was originally developed by Mary Bowles. Her son was born in 1975, and he had some special needs. Back then, they didn't call it autism. They didn't have a lot of treatment for it, and she kept going to doctors, and they would partially treat what was going on, but he always had something that just didn't feel right. So she decided to create something on her own. She went and she talked to a lot of experts in their fields, in light, sound, and motion, and she brought together all of this technology, all of these concepts into this sensory learning program. It was originally designed to help her son with the learning and behavior problems, but we're starting to find out that there's so much more that this helps, because it helps the brain get a nice solid foundation so it can learn from that foundation, and everything is easier after that. So the sensory learning program itself, see right there, there's a table up there. A lot of times we just make a little nest in there. We put a whole bunch of pillows and some fuzzy blankets, and the person lays on their back and they stare up at that little light box right there, and they wear those headphones. And what happens is the table rotates in a circle. It kind of goes up and down and side to side. And as it does that, it connects the parts of the brain. And the parts it connects, you got top to bottom, left to right, front to back. These are all those highways that we need in our brain to be able to do things quickly, to make sense of things. It engages all of the senses simultaneously, to include vision, auditory, and vestibular. And it also puts a little bit of proprioception, which is knowing where your body parts are, because you can actually hear the table go as you're moving. All right, I love the fact that it's a controlled sensory experience. It's in a nice dark room. It's very safe. A lot of parents are worried that their kids can't handle the dark room, but once they start that rocking sensation on the table, they go, okay, this is great. I'm just going to sit here for a while. And they tend to love it. It's very calm. It's a very steady rotation of the table. And then we also have other parents that are worried that, so their kid has motion sickness. Yeah, that's what we're about to treat with this thing. So the motion sickness, if they have the ability to get in a car that's driving straight and doesn't take a lot of windy curves, then they do great on this table. Because the table, once it starts rotating, it has that same exact motion 600 times per treatment period. So it tends not to make them woozy. I love that it's a non-cognitive approach. So the person that's doing this training does not have to sit and follow instructions, aside from laying on their back, listening to music, and watching a light. We don't have lots of other instructions in there. You don't need a lot of motivation, and we found that out. We've had lots of teenagers who don't really even want to be there, and all they have to do is lay there, watch the light, and not fall asleep, and they do great. And I love also that it's a relatively quick time commitment, and I'll explain that in a second. It jumpstarts development. So especially in the kids or in the people who've had lots of therapies previously, there's something about this program that just brings it all together. Everything that they've already learned, it's in there. They just need to connect it and make it make sense. It's foundational, so everything that you learn after this program becomes much easier to incorporate in what you already know, and the results are lasting. It's like going to school for your brain. The only time you would need to do this again would be if you had a brain injury later and everything became scattered. So I wanted to put this up here just to show you how it affects the vision. Okay, so a lot of times when people hear vision, they think 20/20. What I'm explaining here is going to be more like the visual field. In that little spot to the left right there, you can see the visual field is about that big. So when you're working with a visual field that big, you're not going to see the entire picture around you. You're not going to hear the entire picture around you. You're not going to sense the entire picture around you. So every time you're either going to become hyper-focused on what you're doing, or you're going to start to go, hey, where's those squirrels? Okay. Now, later on, after you do the program, you end up noticing that the visual field tends to get bigger. And when it gets bigger, all of a sudden you have the ability to see more of your environment. You start to be able to figure out, if I do this thing, it's going to affect this thing over here. You start to notice that, boy, I should probably be paying attention to that teacher. It sounds like she might be doing something important, instead of my friend up here who's clicking his pencil on the table or wiggling around a lot. The listening profile. Okay, so we do mostly screening for the listening profile. If we find anything with the hearing, say pathology-based things, we do absolutely refer to an audiologist. However, we have something here that we can find the pattern of how they're hearing. The way they tend to come in is they tend to be very sensitive for certain frequencies, and they tend to be undersensitive for other things. So that's like, they're listening to you talk like this, and it's really hard to pay attention when somebody talks like that, because you don't get that flow. You don't get that sense that you can predict what they're going to say next. And as they go through the program, you tend to see everything start to smooth out, where they don't have extra sensitivities, and they don't tend to have problems hearing certain other frequencies. So just fine motor skills. This is an example of somebody who did go through the sensory learning program. This was a 10-year-old that went through here. You notice how she really, she got so bored trying to get everything to make sense. In the first part, she just started drawing a picture of herself. And then after 8 months, after starting the program, everything started to come along. You could see all of this information was in her head. She just needed to share it. She needed to be able to put it on paper. And you notice it's relatively on the lines. I'm really proud of her. All right, details, being able to draw what you see. All right, so this was this little boy, 6 years old, and he started out with kind of a blob. Looks a little bit like a dog, kind of. You got the 4 legs. I love that. But you notice after 90 days after starting, you're starting to get, oh, look, there's a collar. You're starting to get an outline. You can actually see details, and it definitely looks like a dog. I'm going to very quickly read through these because these are all notable things that have happened in the past with the sensory learning program. Improved school and work because there's a better ability to prioritize tasks, to multitask, communicate effectively, relate to others. Time management's big. You're going to catch a big change in that. The ability to cope with busy environments. Home life tends to get better because the relationships tend to get a little easier, a lot less yelling, a lot more paying attention. Communication improves. Time management gets better again. Sleep patterns. This is big. The big thing that this table helps with is it helps get a person out of fight or flight. When you're out of fight or flight, it's so much easier to rest, to digest, to be able to handle your moods. Everything in there tends to get a little bit easier. They tend to have different appetites. I've actually seen some of them start to crave broccoli. That one shocked me a little. Recreation tends to be more fun because you can actually take them to a different environment without worrying about them. And then cognitive. There tends to be an ability to focus afterwards. So attention span tends to increase. Less distractible, better short-term memory, improved visual processing and auditory processing, and the ability to learn new things easily. And when they can learn new things easily, they tend to seek out new things. So you start to see them want to explore more. And finally, emotional. A lot less emotionally reactive. Just for instance, my daughter went through this. Before this, if her friend said, I want to play with another person today, my daughter would just, she hates me. But after she went through the table, she's like, okay, so I'll just go find another friend today. No big deal. Self-esteem is affected by this. Energy levels. Because you have the ability to rest now, you can now get a full night's sleep and come out the next day and be able to handle the next day. Emotional responsiveness. I had one kid that started sharing more with his siblings. That was pretty cute. General emotional tone tends to be more stable. They can cope with stress a little easier, and they tend not to get overwhelmed as fast. So this is where we talk about the time commitment. All right, so sensory learning program, it's a 30-day intervention. We first get a hold of you and we do some testing to see if you're a good candidate for the table. Honestly, I would say every human would be able to benefit from the table. But the thing is you have to be willing to sit on a table, keep the headphones on, and stare at the light. If you're constantly falling asleep, if you absolutely do not want to be there, then we work with you until you do want to be there. There's a lot of people, like we've had some stroke patients that they couldn't keep their eyes open, they couldn't stay awake. We ended up having to actually do that twice to get the good results, because you need the time with your eyes open and listening to the headphones. All right, so here goes. The program itself is 12 consecutive days in the office. It's 2 30-minute sessions, and it's built differently for adults and children. So if it's children, and we know children don't like to sit still for longer than 30 minutes, so we had to program it so they had a 4-hour break between their 2 sessions. So they could get out, get squirrels out, and go walk around and run and jump and swim. The adults have the ability to do it with a 15-minute break in between. So usually the kids come in the morning, take a 4-hour break, and then they come in the afternoon. The adults come in, and within an hour and a half, they're in and out. And then when they're done with that, they're going to take a light kit home with them to continue the visual part of it. And they're going to do that for 18 days, twice a day for 20 minutes each. Then we bring you back 30 days after you started, 60 days after you started, and 180 days, just to make sure everything's moving like it's supposed to. So the sensory learning program, how I like to compare it, it's like cleaning your house. When you start out, your brain is pretty much a hot mess like that room on the left. You've spent many, many years when you had new information, just chucking it back in your brain and hoping you could find it later. And after a while, you can't find it later. So it takes longer to process. It takes longer to get it together. So the program, what it is for the first couple days, as you're doing it, it's more of a planning phase. That's where you're taking stock of what you have. And you're getting ready, getting all the boxes and the supplies ready to prep for it. And then right around the middle, that's when you start taking out all your junk. And you start sorting through it and trying to figure out what you want to keep, what you want to get rid of. And then the final part is where you start to put everything back that you do want to keep in a nice orderly fashion so that you can actually find it later. And what's really nice is the new information that you put back in your brain after that, you now have a place to put it. So anything you learn after this is going to be easier to find too. So a lot of people are worried that, hey, this might not work for them or their kids. And Mary Bowles, in her infinite wisdom, decided to put a survey together to find out what the typical success rate was. And she found out it's about 92% success rate. There's an 8% that said, yeah, there's a little bit of change, but nothing really big happened. And that does have a lot to do with diet. She wasn't able to do the survey again after the diet was fixed, but we did find there is a pattern. If there's garbage going in, there's going to be garbage coming out. So the healthier you can be, the better this program goes. Testimonials. All right, so from an occupational therapist, she says, speaking as an OT, I'm very impressed with how the sensory learning program is helping the motor development of the children in my practice. After working with a couple of 3-year-olds for almost a year, I saw residual primitive reflexes, which should have been gone between 7 and 12 months of age, disappear by the end of 12 session days. So when she's talking about primitive reflexes, she's talking about those motor patterns that little babies use to teach themselves how to use their eyes, to teach themselves how to use their body. And if they were distracted during the milestones, they're going to have problems with those motor patterns. And this actually helps that. Okay, as a speech and language pathologist, I find the sensory learning program an incredibly valuable resource. We find our clients that have gone through the program to be much more responsive to therapy. They attend better, and their ability to learn is improved. Not bad. And from a mother, essentially, the program appears to have helped my 6-year-old son connect his head to his body. He's running for the sake of running. He's drawing bodies instead of just heads. And after a year of fruitless effort, Alex just rode his bike for the first time the other day. So about this program, this is not the be-all, end-all part of the program. If something needs to be learned, you still need to be taught that. So talking about a lot of the physical therapy, occupational therapy, vision therapy, you still may need to revisit that. Grammar rules, math rules, that type of thing. But this program makes it a lot easier to learn those bits of information. So when we strengthen the connections and communication between the visual, auditory, and vestibular systems, it may not be the end of the learning and behavior problems, but it is the start of the solutions. So right now I want to show you a news clip of a boy who had gone through the sensory learning program. Here it goes.
When a child has autism, a parent is willing to go anywhere and try anything to get help. Thanks to the persistence of one local family, a new breakthrough treatment has just come to Michigan. Action News Health Team reporter Joanne Perkins here now with more. Joanne?
Frank, this treatment combines 3 individual therapies into one, and it's showing promise not just for autism, but for kids with learning disabilities, attention deficit disorder, and developmental delays. The results can be remarkable, as you're about to see in the case of Eric Callahan.
Okay, this video starts out with a temper tantrum. Every day when we would turn the TV off, it was a disaster, like with about how much TV we could watch. So every day it was like this.
This behavior is not unusual for kids with autism. Neither is Eric's hand flapping or walking on his toes.
The overload of sensory input is too confusing for them to handle, so they'll actually be able to flap in order to concentrate on the flapping and calm themselves down.
They're called sensory problems.
They cannot multitask. So when they're looking at something, it's almost as if they're deaf and can't hear because they suppress or turn off their auditory system.
I'm up in the TV and I don't know where you are, Mom, and I don't care.
Desperate for help, Renee and Eric flew to Colorado, where a new program called Sensory Learning is offered. Renee captured the therapy in her video diary. Twice a day for 12 days, Eric's senses were inundated. A lot goes on at one time. The patient's head goes here underneath a light box. They also wear headphones with music playing, and then the table begins to move.
We're stimulating the brainstem in 3 different areas all at the same time. All 3 systems being stimulated at the same time, so the patient has to develop coordination and put them in sync with one another.
Just 6 days into the therapy, Renee saw a little boy she could hardly believe was hers.
You can see he's sitting down watching TV, which was amazing to me because he was hand flapping from the age of 14 months old. I was walking on air. I was thrilled. I was the happiest woman in the world. I was ecstatic.
Even the tantrums have gone away.
Before, you saw the tantrum over no TV. He turned it off on his own and he wants me to read the book.
Eric improved so much with the treatment that Dr. Brad Habermill brought the technology to Michigan to his office in Flint so families here could be helped.
This by no means is the cure of autism, but it's a very positive intervention that's helping these kids to be able to learn cognitively in a way that they've never been able to before.
Oh, wow. Eric's mom and dad say he's also become much more verbal. They call sensory learning just one piece of the puzzle, but it's a piece that's opening up a whole new world for this little boy.
Okay. All right, so that's it. I'm going into the question part of the talk. Okay, so first one, let's get you all the information in case you need to contact us about these questions. All right, so first question is, do we need to do vision therapy before beginning the sensory learning program? Usually we like to do just a little bit of vision therapy before the program so that the person knows how to track the light as it goes around in a circle. So probably 6 to 8 vision therapy sessions before we put them through the program is the best possible. However, everybody's different and everybody's schedule is different, so we try to work around that. It's not absolutely necessary. Next one, what is the best age for this? All right, youngest that has been successful has been 2 years old. For that one, you got to get a lot of the glow-in-the-dark toys, and we got to get the lasers out and just keep them playing through the entire session. Oldest, I would say up to 100. The biggest thing, the older a person gets, the more they like to sleep. So as long as they don't try to get grumpy when you try to keep waking them up, they should be fine all the way up until death, actually. Does the auditory processing testing part of the evaluation take the place of APD testing with a specialist? Absolutely not. We use the information that we're getting from the hearing profile, and we're using that to help program what the program is going to be like in the sensory learning table. But if we sense anything is off, then we definitely talk to an audiologist. Would there be a reason to do the sensory learning program after vision therapy if vision therapy was successful? For the vision side, no. A lot of times we do get a lot of the good stuff with the vision therapy. The main reason I would say doing it after a vision therapy program would be if there's high levels of anxiety, they're still not fond of loud noises and busy crowds. So fight or flight type stuff. That's when I would use it. All right, can you share the diet you recommend? Okay, we have a list of quite a few books that we recommend. If you want to email us at thatvisiontherapy@live.com, we can get those to you. Does being on medication affect the program, and would they need to be off the medication first? We strongly recommend that you don't change the medication as you're going through the program. After the program, you start to need the medication. You notice the medication is not as necessary, but definitely talk to your doctor about it before changing anything. Would a 17-year-old male be considered a child or an adult? We consider anybody over 14 years old to be more towards the adult, somebody who can take a break and go back to the table pretty quickly. I've seen some pretty mature 12-year-olds. Anything prior to that, yeah, we usually want a 4-hour break. because their brains need that time to reorganize. Okay, how about non-compliance or argumentativeness? Yes, we've had quite a few patients come in that they could not be candidates for vision therapy because they wouldn't do their homework when we sent it with them. So what I love about this one is they get in there, you stick them on the table. We have somebody watching them, make sure they're looking at the light and listening to the music. And then the big thing with non-compliance is we got to make sure that they do the light kit at the end. But it's 20 minutes morning and night. It's them staring at a light. It's a light that turns on and off like this. So it's kind of like watching a jellyfish. So most people tend to crave that. Argumentativeness. Yes, we have definitely seen a shift in argumentativeness after the program's been over. That's like that one patient that started sharing with his siblings. We didn't think that was going to happen. It was great when it did. If it was just ADD medicine taken to concentrate at school, would we discontinue the medicine for the treatment? If you're already on the medication, keep on the medication. If you're already off the medication, try not to change too much. What would be reasons for an adult to complete the program other than a brain injury? We've had some really good success with anxiety, writer's block type of thing. People who don't like to leave their house because everything's dangerous, seems dangerous. People who aren't comfortable with driving, they come in here and they feel a lot more comfortable getting out in busy traffic. There's a whole bunch of reasons that you could do. Detoxing. We've had some mold exposure patients, chemical exposure patients, because their body was in fight or flight, they couldn't detox. So we helped get them out of fight or flight so they could learn to get rid of the stuff that was bad for them. It also kind of deals with emotional baggage, like mommy issues and daddy issues. It helps communication with family members. Okay. Well, we had one person say that we could talk about her son. Okay, so we had this one patient, his name was Tristan, and he had a really big problem with car sickness. Just getting in the car was a chore. I'd say about somewhere between 6 and 8 days of doing the therapy. He was actually up on the mountain roads riding, and he didn't want to try to jump out of the car because it was too overwhelming. So it did help him a lot with the car sickness. And he'd also helped him run more gracefully. Yeah, it's definitely more graceful. He started to figure out that he could run across his body instead of all over like that. Is there continuing ed for this program? There is not at the moment, but if you would like it, I can definitely cook that up. Just contact us at visiontherapy@live.com and we will talk to you about it. All right, so best way to do this is if you want to come in for a trial on the table, we can do that very easily. It's usually about 15 minutes just to see if you or your child would even like it. You can call our office at 520-886-8800. You can also visit our webpage at azvisiontherapy.com. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you later.